right, good morning everyone. Can everybody hear me? Yes, good. Are you guys having a good morning? Well, listen, hey, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to hang out with you guys. When Matt and Clark asked me to support, I was a happy yes. This is a really interesting topic. I do have to tell you, I'm a little nervous. I got two of my former bosses in the room, Mayor Berkowitz and Commissioner Bishop. So I'm a little nervous, but really happy to be here, and thank you so much. It's a great Monday. We got AFN downtown, and it's Indigenous Peoples Day, so really good energy in the room. Just in case you guys, my little background real quick, I just like you heard, I work at the Anchorage School District. I support communications, external affairs, and publications. Prior to that, I was with the police department doing the same thing. And prior to that, I was a journalist for almost 30 years, and so I'm going to tap into those skills to have a good conversation with these folks here up here on the stage. So with that, I'm going to ask each one to introduce themselves quickly, and then just give us a real quick high-level understanding from your guys' lane on the digital divide, and then we'll get into the questions. So I will start with Thomas, right?
Test. Right. Hi, I'm Thomas Lochner. I'm the director of the Alaska Broadband Office.
How do you understand the digital divide?
It's more than just a bandwidth question. It's an opportunity question. And the way that the Broadband Office is approaching this is because the IIJA, or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, had two distinct sections, one for infrastructure, which had the lion's share of the money, and the other for digital equity, which in some ways is even more important, because it's the infrastructure is like getting a car. The equity is how to find a gas station, how to turn the car on, how to drive safely, how to understand the use of it in a meaningful way that actually helps folks. And so the digital divide in Alaska is really broken up between the folks who know and understand broadband and kind of the folks who don't know and understand broadband. In my first AFN event, I was manning the booth for the state of Alaska and asked a person, hey, she was from Kovach, how do you like your broadband? She said, what's broadband? And so it was a good lesson to understand that the terms we all use and take for granted aren't necessarily ubiquitous. And so it's making sure that we get the capacity to the locations, but also making sure that people can safely understand and use it to help themselves in their lives.
Great, thank you so much. Jeremiah.
I'm Jeremiah Beckett. I'm the CEO at Cordova Telecom. I've been there about 6 years and grew up in Cordova, so I've had the opportunity to come back and help my community. And when I look at digital divide and equity, I think of safety and opportunity. Can I get the services I need to live safely and have access to those resources to live in the community in the area I want? And is there opportunity, whether it's education, healthcare, commerce? How do we make sure that those digital opportunities and being able to participate with the rest of the world are here to bring our kids home? And a short anecdote to add on, when I grew up in Cordova in the 80s, my dad was one of the teachers, and he brought the computer with the internet to a classroom and said, this is gonna change how we do education. And everyone's like, so we gotta move that box to every single room? And at the time, that's what we had to do, because we had one computer, one modem, one connection. And now our school has smart boards, every student has a laptop, and it has changed the way we do it. And when our community got reliable broadband, that's what allowed me and my wife to move back, because we were both high-tech workers, we teleworked, and we had access in our community to go live and raise our kids where we wanted to in a safe environment. and still give them access to everything they would in the lower 48. So when I think of the divide, I think of safety and opportunity.
Great.
Thanks for having me here, too.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Christine O'Connor, Alaska Telecom Association. The digital divide, I guess I think of it as, can you do the things you need to do online if you want to, if you need to? It's kind of great to go off the grid still, but, so I'm a commercial fisherman, I'm a set netter in the Nushiak and Bristol Bay, and because the digital divide is narrowing, I can go home and fish with 6th generation of our family on Ecock Beach and still stay connected and do the things in this realm that I need to do. And I can spend 6 weeks out there. And that never would have been possible when you just didn't have access. So I just think having access how you want it, where you need it, it is the, whether you have that or not, that's the digital divide.
Great. Natalie?
Tess, thank you. Hi, Natalie Kovach, General Field Representative for USDA's Rural Utility Services, and thank you for having me. This is my former employer. I just wanted to throw that out there. So we are, one big happy telecom family for the most part up here. And when I think of the digital divide, I think of how difficult it is to make a business case in our rural communities, and Rural Utility Services is here to help with that CapEx funding so that there is a business case to serve the people in these rural communities, and there's not a more difficult state to make that business case than in Alaska. So.
Great, thanks. All right, so we're going to get into the questions, and so Natalie, I'm going to start with you, so if you want to pull that microphone back up again, please. All right, so the first question is, can you give us an overview of how the USDA's programs are addressing the unique challenges faced by rural and tribal communities right here in Alaska when it comes specifically to connectivity?
That is a great question, and one of the ways that we're doing that is happening right now. Our Broadband Technical Assistance Program, which was established, I think, a year or so ago, and we have Chris Proctor in the audience, and he runs that program. And it's just an example of how we are being creative and flexible in getting these solutions out there.
Great, thank you. Thomas, so Alaska's geography and dispersed populations make broadband expansion particularly challenging. So how is the state addressing these specific geographic challenges?
Great question. In the little bit of background, in the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which the Broadband Office is managing, there are 2 different subsections, a Volume 1 and a Volume 2. Volume 1 is the location challenge, hey, where are all the locations in Alaska? And Volume 2 is, how are you going to run your grant? And the state of Alaska did something, I'm deviating from the answers I sent in. The state of Alaska did something very unique to all 50 states and 6 territories, in that most folks had their extremely high cost threshold based on population. And in Alaska, that didn't work, because Galena has approximately the same population as Adak, but the cost to get there is significantly different. And so what we did is we said, hey, and worked with the NTIA to do this, let's do this on a mileage basis on the rurality of each location. And the NTIA said, that sounds good. So in order to make sure that we have a fair and equitable distribution of the BEAD funding to locations, we've done 3 different areas. We've got fiber and road, which generally means that there's either a road there or they already have fiber to then get to the locations within that area. There's rural communities, and that's the Galenas and Adaks. And as you can imagine, Galena's 50 miles away from Ruby. Adak is, well, it's close to Atka, but quite a bit farther away from Nikolsky. And then we had the non-rural based locations, and I'll talk about those in a different setting. But in order to make sure that there is a fair distribution to the rural locations in Alaska, the mileage-based system works the best.
Thank you. Do you want to go ahead and do you want to expand on what you were saying just a little bit earlier?
Oh, the Patsy's, the non-community based?
Yeah.
Sure, there's about 11,000 locations identified by the FCC and then codified by the NTIA that are non-community based. And the Broadband Office euphemistically calls those Patsy's cabins because the very first one we zoomed in on and the only one that is named in the entire FCC map is Patsy's cabin. And so we use that as the euphemism for locations that are off a slough, off of the Yukon River. And so it would be millions of dollars to build to that single location. And those locations are most likely not going to get fiber. In fact, pretty much guaranteed they're not going to get fiber. And we'll have to figure out a different technological solution to get there. Most likely some sort of satellite system.
Great, thank you. All right, Christine. So as somebody who represents telecom providers across Alaska, can you share how private companies are contributing to solving this digital divide?
Yeah, boy, they're building stuff right now. You got to have a network before you can have digital equity, you have to have a network to even access. So that, as you saw this morning with Julia's slides and mine, is happening very quickly. Long way to go, but a lot happening. As I mentioned, over $2 billion in CapEx from ATA's members has been invested in connecting Alaskans since 2017. But the other piece I think we don't talk about, even though it's going on all the time, is how our providers support their members, if they're co-ops or their subscribers, whatever you want to term them. They're holding cybersecurity or be safe on the internet seminars for elders. They're helping folks switch to over-the-top streaming for their entertainment. All different kinds of activities and support is just happening as part of everyday business. And that's also an important part of closing that digital divide, is making sure you know what you need to do to be safe, you know what you can do, and maybe you get some new ideas of what things that would help you in your life. So it's kind of across the board. I usually talk about building networks, but there's just as much going on in kind of what you would call use and adoption spaces.
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit on that? I think a lot of people don't have a good handle on that side of things. So could you expand a little bit on really why support is so crucial with this?
Sure, and I think about, one example, I'll just pick on my mom. So she's 79. She goes online to do certain things. She was, during the pandemic, of course, stuck online and stuck at home, and she asked me, we were talking, she had discovered videos, Facebook videos. She said, have you ever heard of a guy named Shaq? I was like, yeah, I have. Well, she had apparently Shaquille O'Neal does kind of motivational videos. That is great. I'm so glad she's online. We can chat. She can stay in touch. But also, when she has a problem, so she's been an MTA subscriber for years, she calls, she knows that help desk number, and she loves them. And they are so helpful. They walk her through whatever's going on. So those are the kind of activities that I hear about from both my members telling me what they're doing, but also just personal anecdotes like, hey, I called MTA and they were really helpful. And that's, I think, all part of closing the digital divide.
Great, thank you. So, Jeremiah, from a local provider's perspective, what are your thoughts on the main hurdles that you face delivering broadband to remote areas in Alaska?
That's a good question. I think it varies across the state depending on your regions. Like the North Slope versus South Central Alaska, we have very different environments, land ownership, permitting requirements, but all those kind of Alaska challenges aside, I think there's kind of two themes I've observed. One is the funding. Without the programs that are available today, most of these locations would probably never be planned because it just financially does not make sense without the support. And the programs from the NTIA, the USDA, the state, the FCC, those are essential for Alaska to keep our services running. And when I think of the services, I don't just think of broadband, but voice too. What's the point if you can go to Google if you can't call 911 when you're hurt? Like, you need both, right? So it's telecommunications that are necessary, but funding's the big one. And with these programs here, I think we've seen tremendous investments in the state and people continuing to go after those programs for their communities. And it will change most of our lives and our families' lives, the kids, and set up Alaska to be truly part of the nation in the digital world. And then the other big thing I think is real common for all of us is the short construction season. That will vary in place to place, but down in the lower 48, they probably get to build 9 to 12 months out of the year. And here we have 4 to 6 months, maybe, depending on the year. Last year in Cordova, it started raining July 4th, like inches a day, and didn't stop until it started snowing. We had a 2-month season that year. And you can't have crews in 2 inches of rain, digging ditches, building towers. So our short construction season and then the weather related to that really impacts how quickly we can do these projects. So 5 years is great. But those are probably common across the state, whether it's a telco, a tribal agency, a consortium, is money and the weather and logistics, because a lot of these remote places, maybe we get a barge once a month, maybe it's once a year. You forget a piece of equipment or you have equipment break down in the field, and all of a sudden, instead of taking it to the shop and getting a mechanic to fix it, you just paid 30 grand for a helicopter to deliver a part and a mechanic to fix it for you, and all of a sudden your project costs go up drastically. So the accessibility for all of us is really challenging, and you got to plan like around the weather and around the worst case scenarios to make sure you're fully equipped to deliver cost effectively, because we don't want to run out of that funding budget and have to ask for more. But yeah, funding, weather, and logistics are kind of key themes for rural.
It plays all into that support role. You know, could you talk a little bit about just the part of where planning really does come to play into this, especially if you have to transition and move to only a 2-month construction cycle? So how important is planning for this type of development?
It's extremely important relative to costs, because if you improperly plan something or something gets missed on the checklist, it impacts you drastically. Last year with the rain in our project, we had crews stuck on a mountaintop for more than a month. Like, they ran out of food, we couldn't deliver them supplies. And so you're not only dealing with like logistics of equipment and materials, but also safety of resources. And so you always plan extra and plan backup approaches to delivery for those logistics scenarios, whether it's for the weather case, can they walk off the top of the mountain, or can they get to the river where the boat can go to? You gotta have backup plans and a good contingency bucket. If you didn't plan a contingency, that will hurt financially, so making sure you're prepared for that as well.
Great, thanks. Natalie, we're going to continue talking about the type of those hurdles. What are some of the main obstacles that the USDA has encountered? And we were just talking about funding these projects to really bridge that divide.
Our biggest obstacle?
In terms of funding.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding. So, where to start with our funding? Or?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, we'll do 2 things. Let's talk about from your perspective. We were just talking about those main hurdles. What are some of those main obstacles that you are seeing in general? And then we can drill it down and elaborate maybe with funding.
Okay, thank you. I would say our biggest hurdle is when you're talking about getting a project under construction, permitting is something that we all struggle with, and delays in environmental clearance that lead to increased project costs that aren't accounted for in the original application. And part of what we try to help with as general field representatives at the USDA is create the most efficient processes for our clients in order to allow them to stay as close as possible to their original build-out timeline, and therefore as close as possible to the original budget that we've funded for the project. A lot of our challenges right now stem from avoiding duplication of federal funding with all of the overlapping funding opportunities, interagency coordination. I know that our Policy and Outreach Department meets with NTIA regularly, and the general field representatives build relationships with our state broadband offices just to coordinate as much as we can. Coordination, communication, those are just challenges that we're facing specifically right now because of the unique times we are with the amount of funding that is available and will be available.
Great, thank you. So, Christine, as there are specific technologies or strategies, are there specific technologies or strategies that Alaska's telecom companies are implementing to better serve and address our underserved communities?
Absolutely. We have an amazing creative history, and Natalie and I have talked about this. Like some of the most unique projects in the U.S. are here in Alaska. Laying cable over tundra. We're going to use all of the above. We're not going to connect every Alaskan in every location with fiber. That's just, I can't even imagine how much that would cost. We're going to connect a lot of Alaskans with fiber. We're going to connect as many as we can with fiber. I would even put it that way because that is the technology that you can have a gig. I was just at a conference when one lower 48 provider was talking about they're planning on, within the next 6 years, having the capability of 20 gigs to each home, which blew my mind. But with fiber, you can plan for that. So we're going to do that wherever possible, and we're already doing that. But we're also still going to use microwave. Microwave can serve our Alaskans with what they need in a lot of places. We're going to be using LEO. We're already using LEO, right? All throughout the state, we've got Starlink dishes everywhere. I got one this summer for being off the grid. We have always had a tradition of, we're really practical. We're like, if it's going to connect someone and we can make it work well, we're going to use it. We have new constellations coming, Telesat, Kuiper, who knows who all is going to be coming on the scene. The one thing to look at when we're evaluating technology is it going to deliver the service that's required? Right now, the kind of table stakes is 100 meg down. So that's you're downloading a movie, 20 meg up, so you're doing a video call or you're sending a file. Those are the speeds required by all these federal programs today. And also, very importantly, less than 100 milliseconds latency, which is that lag time. Anyone that we've got a bunch of Alaska kids in the room, so you remember the old long distance days, right, with that big lag, and the latency is the broadband parallel. That has to be below a certain level for all these new technologies to work. So speed, latency, some other technical nitnoid things, but it all has to perform at a certain level. So you look at your technology, you look where you're trying to go, will it provide that, and hopefully be a little future-proof, because we know the usage is just going up like this. People are going, in 5 years, are going to need a lot more than they need today. So all of the above, as best we can for the situation you're in, and trying to get everybody served using, and it'll be using all the technologies.
I just want to kind of touch base on, you just got connected in a way. From your experience, and we're talking about how fast things are moving and the planning that needs to go into and the support that needs to be in place to really keep moving this forward. From your experience, how fast is this moving, and what are some of the areas that we need to kind of keep on our radar given how rapid this is going?
Yeah, it's going rapid in terms of infrastructure, right? When you think of a project, you put together your application, you get whatever funding, you're talking many months, maybe a year, then your best case, you get your permits in another year, then you start building it, then it rains like Noah's Ark, These projects are several years minimum to get done. So there's a lot of chatter you see in the news media right now about BEAD. You know, they haven't built anything yet. Well, because it takes time to build things. You know, we won't have all of that built out. I mean, the timeline says 5 years, and that's ambitious. So we're talking this decade to get, optimistically, this decade to get everything built, and the major pieces is what I think.
Do you, I'm going to nerd out a little bit. So, and the rest of you, if you guys want to chime in, do you feel, what kind of pressure do you all feel with how fast everything's going? And when you made a point about 5 years versus 10 years, are we conditioned that we should lean more into the 5 years, but really think more 10 years if we really want to do this the right way?
Gosh, I get the frustration, especially when the pandemic hit. Like, we needed it then. But being in this industry, you know, best case scenario, we're 10 years out from the connectivity we ideally would have had during the pandemic. So you kind of realize that and you just set it aside. You realize people not in this industry, though, they're just going, why hasn't this happened yet? So I think it's a combination of knowing the realistic timelines, but explaining to people, you know, when you can, like, yes, we understand support and we want to go faster too, but these are the realities. And we're getting it as quickly as we can. I mean, we all personally experience it when we go somewhere off the grid. You know, you need to be doing something, you can't do it. But then there's also, I guess, the third piece. It's really exciting when you get connected. I used to use a HughesNet, if anyone has used HughesNet. Big old dish on the side of my house out in Bristol Bay. You had to get it just getting that thing directed the right direction. Your husband's out on the forklift, you're in the house, are you connected yet? There's yelling, there's frustration, you finally get connected. And then it's so slow that you're trying to use Gmail and it takes so long to load a page, you forgot what you were trying to do on your Gmail page. And to go from that to, the next thing was, I had 4G LTE. I could surf, I could make phone calls, it was amazing. Then I got a Starlink this summer. It was like triple amazing. So that is exciting to see the progress. So 3 pieces, I guess: frustration, reality, then it finally does happen.
That's good. Do that.
Yeah, and I think that there's just so much that goes into this that the general public is not aware of unless you work in this every day, and you know, you sort of get into this niche, you know, especially if you're in Alaska Telecom. I would say from the federal representative perspective, I feel pressured by our clients. And you know, I do my best to help in any way that I can, but a lot of these projects that we're funding are to enable a better business case for these companies. And there is a, you know, a sense of urgency to do that, especially as we have, you know, LEOs kind of disrupting the market. And we're all figuring out how we're going to do this and not build just bridges to nowhere. We want, you know, this infrastructure to last. And but you know, everybody loves that mason jar analogy with our rocks and, you know, D2 if you're into different types of fill and sand, and just trying to get the internet to all. And just takes creativity and working together. You know, if you understand how the internet works, and Christine kind of went over this on her slides, but you know, it has to physically get there one way or another, and we depend on each other and our business relationships to make that happen. So.
And then finally, it's strategies. Given that there is as Christine mentioned, on the BEAD side, a 4-year timeline with a 1-year extension potentially, making sure that as much as possible, the federal permitting, the state permitting is organized, and the Department of Commerce Community Economic Development, which the Broadband Office is under, is working very closely with the Department of Natural Resources through the Office of Permit, Project Management and Permitting to try and streamline all of that so that the OPMP in the DNR will be facilitating making sure those conversations happen and those permits go through both on the state and federal side. We go down to the states and meet with the other state leaders, and they go, oh yeah, it's going to be 6 months for permitting. And we go, we wish, right? And so if we can get permitting down to 1.5 years, that's kind of a dream state. then we do have a chance to get all this built within 4 years or the 5-year with the extension.
Do you want to talk about a little bit about the priorities that you guys are looking at for, closing the gap?
Yes. Within the BEAD program, the priority is for, and preference is for fiber. Christine said, we don't necessarily know how much it costs. We did an estimate for the federal government. They gave us 60 cents on the dollar. So we won't be able to build fiber everywhere. We are grateful to the USDA and to the NTIA for the other programs that will help fill the gap between what we were allocated for BEAD and what's needed to build out. And to Christine's point earlier, we will have to use all the technologies. The second thing is the Broadband Office on the 10th, last Thursday, was approved for our Volume 2, which means then we can now run our grant program. We will be opening up the Notice of Funding opportunity for public comment either today or tomorrow for a full 30-day public comment period, and then mid-December we will open up our grant program for people to start applying. That will then have a 120-day application period, but if you're planning on applying, you can get a jump on it now because all of the broadband serviceable locations within the predetermined project areas are already posted to the website, so you can see what the Alaska Broadband Office is thinking about in terms of how projects might go. The predetermined project areas, just to get a little geeky here, are suggested but not required. And so we've already had companies that say, gee, what about Kotlik? Because Kotlik sits somewhere, kind of right between Emanak and Stebbins. And so does Kotlik get fiber from Stebbins or does Kotlik get fiber from Emanak? Well, if there's a good case to be made, the Broadband Office is open to hearing that case. And as a consequence, if the Broadband Office, I don't actually remember it, has it in Emanak, but it's better served out of the northern communities, we're good with that. So there is a preference for fiber. We will want to get fiber in as many locations as possible so that in 10 years we can do 20 gig over 20 gig. But we have to face the reality that the funding for BEAD won't cover fiber everywhere, and we'll have to take advantage of all the technologies available.
Can you talk a little bit? One of the things one of the takeaways that I'm here, A, I need to know about LEO because that's new to me. And B, I am channeling when you're saying technology. We have the technology with $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman with Oscar. But I'm hearing a lot about partnership, and the importance of partnership in this. Can you speak to a little bit, each of you, why partnerships are so critical?
Yes and no.
Oh, right.
And the reason I can and I can't is because the state will not be entering into any partnerships as a function of the BEAD program. We will be facilitating the funding for those partnerships, and so it's probably best for me to allow the other folks on the panel to talk about those.
I think especially in Alaska, partnerships are extremely important. Our local telecom, we work with the other utilities, our city, the state, the tribal organizations. They're all your stakeholders. They might be the landowners. They might just be the recipients. But as a local provider, we're essentially a steward for public safety and connectivity. And so we need to engage in outreach with all the groups and understand their needs and work to support those. And I do think, kind of to the prior question too, like Alaska's always had stopgap. We could put a satellite on our cabin or get a little Rhino for communicating phones, but the funding that's available now is to build generational infrastructure. This is stuff that will be here not just for me and my kids, but their kids and potentially longer. In my community, the power cables and the copper cables are over 50 plus years old. So this has got to last us that much longer, and we're really investing in the future generations with all this funding, not just let's turn on the light. Let's get them connected, stay connected, have it reliable, and something we can build on, hopefully, as our community grows. But partnerships are really important.
Yeah, exactly what Jeremiah said. So my hometown, Dillingham and Cordova, are about the same size, a lot of similarities, served by cooperatives, and that generational commitment and the partnerships across the communities is critical. I mean, the co-op in Dillingham was actually one of the foundational. The electric side started in my husband's grandfather's chicken coop, where he had a generator that he started sharing across the community, and then they needed a bigger generator, and they formed the co-op. And it's that, I guess the term today is sustainability. That's what that looks like. It's your community working across those issues. And I think on a larger scale, I am very excited about the partnerships we're seeing with Doyon, Chalista, Alaska Communications, Bethel Native Corporation, GCI, these companies that have a really big scale and can serve large regions, and with the regional corporations that also have a really big reach and also have a lot of shareholders that need connectivity and need this infrastructure. So bringing that expertise and resource together with the resource and the need on the other side is really powerful, and I hope we see a lot more of that going forward.
Well, we always say, we're just the funding arm, and our clients are the ones who do all the work. So our partnership with internet service providers, telephone companies, is critical to any of this happening. It's also our interagency partnerships with both state and federal agencies. I have relationships with the BLM, I have relationships with the Park Service. So as my role, being the federal, representative, maintaining those relationships, communication is critical, I think, for just assisting and getting things done.
Great, thank you. Jeremiah, so how has the community responded to the initiatives and improvements that you've made so far?
Very positive. We're actively doing a lot of projects, so the different stakeholders and different recipients, I guess, of the value. But Cordova, where I'm from, is a hub community for a lot of these locations, and we got our fiber connectivity about a decade ago, but a lot of the additions to use that have just been occurring over the last few years with some of these other programs. But I think it's creating new commerce opportunities. Like, I was a teleworker, I was able to move home, bring my family there, my income, my kids. In Cordova, we've seen the digital equity progression. So our school went after the distance learning and telehealth funding, and they were successful, and they put in Wi-Fi access points in every single classroom, smart boards in every classroom, laptops for every kid. And now our students are taught digitally. They have access to like UAF, UAA materials. And so for the kids, they're able to grow on parity with everyone in the lower 48 and participate. Healthcare-wise, we've seen folks that probably would have had to leave our town without telehealth. Now they have a fast enough connection and the equipment where they can stay in our community, not have to live in Anchorage or move to the lower 48 because they have the access to the healthcare specialists they need locally. And just folks being able to benefit from those things. So when someone figures out they can sign up for their hunting license online and they don't have to wait for the one guy to come to town to do the tickets or do their PFD online, those things are like kind of groundbreaking. All of a sudden it's like, wow, I don't have to go somewhere to do it. I can do this here. Or I don't have to wait until beginning of the month because I ran out of data on my satellite service. So just the access to services in the state has been really beneficial. And I think the communities are waiting for it, they're ready for it. Like, we've pretty much all had satellite access at least in Alaska for a long time, so we know we've had a taste of what's out there, but having it fast, reliable, low latency where we can consume any service. I got stuck on a mountain last month with my son. There was something wrong with the four-wheeler, and the guide didn't have it. We got to reception range, and we were able to watch the YouTube video how to fix it, and we bush fixed our four-wheeler and got out of there. Another case might be where someone gets stranded and hurt, and they're able to connect to those services and call the Coast Guard, and get rescued. So whether it's just the daily lives, the kids at the school, the people, the elders that want to stay, it really brings broadband and voice services brings something for everyone, and it allows us to really enjoy our hometowns, our way of life, and still be connected. So yeah, I think it's been very positive. I think in Yakutat, as an example, there was 408 building units, 406, 99.5% signed up for service. And the 2 that didn't were trusts that we couldn't find the owners to get approval for their land. So it was really good adoption there, and we've seen that in all the communities we've worked with. Everyone's ready for it. They want to get connected. They want reliability, cheaper service, and yeah, it's all positive.
Could you, I'm hearing really great stories from you and Christine on that local level and that really Alaskan experience that we forget about outside of our urban settings. But when we're talking about access, can you guys talk about how much of a difference, I heard it, you just talked about it from an education standpoint and a health standpoint, but being able to provide this access specifically to our rural communities, can you talk about from your lanes how much of a difference you've seen and how much of the improvements that we've seen so far?
Yeah, I'll take a pass first since I already chatting, but so like I mentioned, I moved to Cordova or back home about 12 years ago, and we got a subsea fiber to Valdez. They had 25/3 service. It was good enough. We could do a video chat. But when me and my wife were both online, only one of us could, so we had to take turns. And we would call the local provider and be like, can we get 35 megs and maybe 5 up? And they're like, why do you need it? And we're like, we're working from home. And they gave it to us, and we kept increasing the speeds, and now, I think our community 110 is kind of the standard, and that supports a lot of business scenarios. But you can also get more upload and better commitment there. And 12 years ago, we were the first teleworkers to move back to Cordova. Now I'm aware of about a dozen, and half of them were people that grew up in the community and came back. The other half were people that wanted to enjoy our lifestyle and be near family. And so it's actually stimulated growth in the economy too. So I don't know if that answers it directly, but.
Yeah.
Well, so we hosted ATA's annual conference in Cordova last year, which was phenomenal. I'm about ready to move to Cordova at some point. Although my husband's like, it rains too much. That's another conversation. But what I was so struck by is the vibrancy of the community, the connectivity. You have teleworkers. You have elementary school kids coming out your ears there. There's like a baby boom in Cordova. We hiked up this hill, and as we're coming down, here comes all the second graders. And it was like 40 little second graders, which for a small community, it's like, what is going on here? And talked to people that were helping to host the meeting, and they said, yeah, people are, thriving in Cordova. And I think the connectivity that Cordova Telecom has brought is a huge part of that, because they can be there if they want to be.
Great, thanks.
Is it 40 second graders, or how many? There were so many.
There's a lot. A quarter of our town is kids, so.
Well, we got a little less than 15 minutes left, so I'm going to do a general question, and then wanted to open it up to some questions from the audience to give you guys some space to have a conversation. But what I'm going to ask, just we'll go down the line. What excites you about this this endeavor and where in the direction that we're going? Again, hearing about the pressure, especially from public. I want it now. My family has it. I'm ready for it. Give it. So, what really excites you and keeps that passion going, and understanding why we need to continue to, break through these barriers?
I can go. I have the fortune to have been on both sides of the fence with this whole thing. So when I was at Cordova Telecom, I applied for some of this funding, Reconnect, Community Connect, 2 of our rural utility services funding opportunities. And I remember going to Yakutat, visiting the school, and seeing one kid, being able to be on the internet at a time. I've been to Alaska, and I was there before, connectivity is what it is now. and it's just night and day. And I know Jens, excuse me, can relate to that with your Kovach project, and just seeing the difference these projects make, that's so exciting to me.
And I think just seeing our rural communities thrive, it is really motivating. And the flip side of that, I thought of this when the grant thing for Yakutat, the first one, is like, that is going to put Yakutat on a path for all of these opportunities, commerce, healthcare, education, that they would not have otherwise. And that's going to advantage that community and a similar community that didn't get that connectivity. And this is before the infrastructure bill. So it's like, it was very patchwork initially. It was like, oh, lightning striking, this community is going to get connectivity. And I kept thinking, what is going to happen to similar communities that don't get connected? It was worrisome. So now we're in this moment where every community like that will get connected over the next 10 years or so. So that's just really exciting. It's encouraging. We're going the right direction.
Thanks.
I always thought if we could create the opportunity for my kids or my friends' kids to come back home and live near us, work and play near us, that was one of the key end goals. And Cordova provided that opportunity to me and my family, and so we looked at how do we do that for Cordova, and then being a hub community, how do we help all the villages around us have that same opportunity? And I grew up with a lot of kids in those areas, and we started collaborating. I'm like, how do we make sure that whatever your child goes and do, if they could work remote, they have the option to come home, even if it's just for the summers or during subsistence time. So mine's kind of, I guess, self-motivated, but I want everyone to have the same opportunity I did and the opportunity to come home.
Great, thanks. Thomas?
I'm a little odd in that I'm excited to do something and also do nothing. And so there's two anecdotes that I have that describe this. When I was just hired for the broadband office, and less than a month or two in, I went to a free Thanksgiving and sat down with some folks from Russian Mission. And I was all excited, and I was going to change their world. I was going to bring broadband to their location. They looked at me and said, no. We are content with our subsistence lifestyle, and there's nothing that someone who looks like you has ever, with your excitement, come in and done for our village that hasn't harmed us. It's like, whoa, okay. I got to reevaluate what I'm doing. And so it's not, I'm going to bring in change anything. I'm going to give the opportunity for folks to make that decision on their own. And then during one of our tribal consultations, there was a fellow who lives in Marshall, and he said, hey, when the school closed down in Ohagamute, the town died. And I was like, okay. So then the next thing I did was immediately go to see if there was a dot in Ohagamute, and there is. So there will be some broadband in the location where that fella's historical village was. And the hope is then that should he choose to then go back to his ancestral village, he has that opportunity. And then to everybody's point on this panel, the broadband that is there allows folks to be successful where they are. So there's two separate sides to this, in that for folks who don't want it, don't have to have it. For folks who do want it, we want to make sure that opportunity is there, and that's what excites me.
Great, thanks. I'll open it up to questions from the audience. I'm going to do my Donahue. All right, so I'll come to you if you raise your hand, if you want to say your name, introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question to the panel. Good morning.
Sean Williams, the Vice President of Government Affairs and Strategy at Pacific Dataport. We're middle mile suppliers for OneWeb and for Starlink as resellers. My question is about resilience and redundancy, and I suppose it's probably for Christine and Thomas if he wants to take it. It sounds like a lot of people have had really good experiences with Starlink, which is awesome. I appreciate you mentioning that. But we've had some fiber breaks where people have been offline for weeks, if not months. And I believe that our technology, satellite LEOs, are of the capacity to back up fiber networks when used, right? We have several places that are doing it. We have 30 plus schools that have moved over to LEO satellites. My question is, oh, and one more thing. We talk about a ring, but there is no ring going out to the Aleutian chain. And for most communities on the Panhandle, there's no ring. So my question is, are we thinking about resilience and redundancy so that it's ready at the flip of a switch? Not, you know, it's going to take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get Starlink units out to everyone and then hope that they switch back to my service. Is anyone thinking about that as a backup and resilience?
Great question, Sean, and I can answer from the BEAT side. As I mentioned, right, we sent a letter to the NTIA and said this is what we believe will be necessary to fulfill the fiber preference and priority, and we got 60 cents on the dollar. So as a function of that, yes, we think about resilience of networks, but we first have to think about getting 100 over 20 to every broadband serviceable location that is unserved first and then underserved within the state of Alaska. So from the ABO's perspective, yes, we're thinking about it, but it's a secondary consideration to getting broadband to those locations first. And as Christine mentioned, and as I echoed, all technologies are on the table. And so there will be some that are, hopefully a lot that's fiber, but there will be some that will be served fiber in the community, microwave, fiber in the community, satellite backhaul, and some that maybe just be satellite only in the community. And so we have to make sure we hit all of the broadband serviceable locations first, and then we can move to your resiliency question. And at 60 cents on the dollar, it's going to be very difficult.
I'll add on to it a little bit from a provider's perspective. We always plan redundancy and resiliency. If we're not, then we shouldn't actually be doing this. It's a necessity. You can't build a road and not have a backup path for the emergency crew to come in. And in cases like Sitka or up north, those are really big investments, and so while there might have been considerations for it, there might not have been the capital funding to implement it the way they wanted to. In Cordova, we actually employ all the technologies. We have fiber backhaul, microwave, geo, LEO, and we try to make our communities as resilient as possible. There's a capital or an operational cost related to that, so in some cases your backup might not be as fast or as big as your main connectivity. But I don't think any of us want to see what happened up north or in Sitka in any other part of Alaska. And so the providers, and I know the other ones here, we all plan for that and use a combination of technologies for it, including GEO and LEO.
Great, we got one question back here. I'll get to you after this. Good morning, introduce yourself and ask your question.
So Brian Miracle with Cool Solutions. Quick question on the funding bill is kind of targeted towards Natalie. With all the funding that's going in and the efforts that are being done to deploy more funding, how is USDA and Alaska Broadband Office dealing with the direct duplication? For example, there's 2 funding projects that have funded Amonic, right? Both USDA and NTIA. Direct duplication. So how is those issues, I guess, being addressed so the maximum amount of funding goes out to where's needed?
You know, our policy at the USDA is to deconflict before making an award to avoid that situation. we spend a lot of time in our evaluation of an application to ensure that there is no what we call enforceable commitment, which is the funding that could be made for an area. So as the field representative, I take that first glance, and we're able to use UCLA data, existing speed tests that are out there, but if there is any doubt, we'll go out in the field and we will do the testing in person. So we are pretty thorough in avoiding that situation, because what stems or what is the result of that is not good for a community. And it can really divide people, and that's the opposite of what we're trying to do here. So I hope that answers your question, Brian.
Well, yeah, I guess, will some of that particular instance of overlap, will that be addressed at any time?
I don't want to speak to any specific situation up here, but we are constantly working to, we have our Office of Tribal Relations here today, and we meet, anytime you want to meet and talk, we can meet and talk, and we try to just facilitate partnership, whether that's with our communities or our, fellow federal agencies. But at the end of the day, we all have to work together, right? So, yeah.
Good. We got one more time. We got one question that we're going to do, and then we got to quickly wrap it up because I'm bleeding over to the next group. So this is our last question.
Thank you. Jens Leipenex, Arctic Slope Telephone Association. Just a question to the panel around taxation of grant funds and your thoughts on the tax treatment, because as of today, I'm not sure everybody's aware, the grant funds, the $1 billion in BEAD funding, as well as Reconnect, Community Connect, all of those funds are fully taxable. So that is something that I think is a major concern as we talk about the billions of dollars being discussed in this room.
Jens, thanks for bringing it up. It's a huge issue. So when we're talking about $2 billion in grant funding coming into the state, that's all taxable. So any provider that's looking to take advantage of these grants has to manage to that tax burden. And in some cases, that prevents a project. Just because the place is so small, so remote, there's not enough economy there to even pay the taxes on the grant. ATA and our delegation are working hard on this. We appreciate our delegation have all co-sponsored legislation in the Senate, in the House, in DC to fix this issue. It's really a big lift to get tax stuff changed, but huge issue, and it will be an impediment to BEAD if it's not fixed very soon.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. I apologize for going over, but I understand that lunch is ready for you all. Please give a big round of applause for our panelists.